What's up, dudes and dudettes of the internet? My name's Seth and we are back in some more Trove to Trove, and today we're going to be taking a look at every single subclass ability in Trove, what they end up actually doing as far as their practicality, and then also a lot of the sneak peek hints as to how they actually operate and what they end up actually doing for your character, rather than the early footage that we ended up having at the Chinese server. We kind of just got to speculate as to what all of the abilities ended up doing. Now that it's actually on the live English test server, I've been able to mess around with it for a couple days, and I kind of wanted to get a better understanding of the whole system before I ended up presenting a video to all of you. So what I was normally going to do in regards to the subclasses is I was going to end up making individual videos for every character using every subclass ability. But unfortunately, the system itself is a little bit lackluster. It's not necessarily as crazy as we all originally had thought it would be. And because of that, we're going to be spending the majority of today's video on the Dino Tamer, because he's my strongest character on the test server, and just kind of messing with all the different abilities and my own opinions as to which ones I think are the best out of testing, and which ones are, you know, just not really worthwhile. So we're going to start all the way at the bottom here. This is the Draco ability, but before we get into it, I do want to point out something very, very interesting with the subclass abilities, and this is not only why a lot of the stuff in today's video is going to be not only subject to change, because we are in the test server, they could end up getting rebalanced and stuff like that, but also the subclass abilities are directly influenced by your character's level and power rank. So a lot of these abilities might seem very, very weak for me because my power rank is not necessarily high enough on a certain character, but then on the live server, we might have somebody who's got an insanely powerful Draco, and suddenly the passive is going to be 10 times stronger, right? So for the Draco, and the way that it works is the level 25, that level is going to end up influencing the passive ability. So reduce cooldown time by 5%. I think if he's at level 30, it reduces it by 7% or 8%, I'm not exactly sure. And then the power rank, that is going to directly influence the skill itself. So this obviously is not going to be a very good skill on a magic character for the Dino Tamer, because physical damage to enemies has a chance to apply fire to them. Hey everybody, this is Sights from the future. As I was just editing the video, I noticed that while I kept saying that the Draco ability was proccing and actually activating with our Dino Tamer, it turns out that it wasn't. I was actually triggering the stinging curse, and I kept saying throughout the whole video, you're gonna see me say it further on in the video today, where I kept saying that, you know, this is the fire effect. It can trigger on a magic character. It doesn't matter. So I just want you to keep that in mind moving forward. But the actual effect itself, let me just show you this right here real quick, and I'll kind of, you know, explain it a little bit better in another follow-up video that I'm going to have. But that right there is the actual fire effect, where it's just going to be triggering like a constant stream of damage. It's the exact same as the Shadowhunter's ability, and ultimately I don't really find it to be that useful. So in any case, folks, I'm just saying, bear with me further in the video, because as far as that recording session is concerned, I thought that Stinging Curse was the Draco's ability. So just keep that in mind while we're moving forward with the rest of the video, and you should be good to go. And the thing that I'm not exactly sure about is, you can see right here, we've got the fire proc going on right there. 15,000 per, we're in U9, that's not necessarily good, but the fact of the matter is that it doesn't crit. That's the biggest thing that scares me about this ability, is the fact that it is not actually causing any critical damage, it's just doing the raw base damage. And because of that, in a lot of ways, it makes the ability absolutely useless. But let's actually swap over to our Shadowhunter so that we can end up trying it out on him, because he's actually a physical based character, right? Ignore all the dragons and stuff like that. I'm trying to get my hands on all the new ones that are on the test server so I can show them all off in a video. But for today's purposes, we're just testing stuff out. So let's see. There we go. So we're still doing the same no crits going on. I don't know if it's based on like physical damage as far as the amount of damage that you end up actually doing. Let's move on to the next one, the Chloromancer. So this again is going to be scaled by your level and power rank of the character. So it's not going to be too impressive. But I have other people on the test server who are a lot more powerful with some of these characters that have given me feedback as to how they actually operate. Enemy attacks have a chance to cover you in thistles. I'm a thistle sifter. I have a sift of unsifted thistles and sifted thistles. I did that completely wrong. I cannot audition for the King's Speech. Returning damage to attackers. So it's kind of like thorns on your character. And near as I can tell, this is another one that is absolutely useless because of the fact that it cannot do any crit damage. Now, we'll see whether or not there's our thorns. There it is. So we're doing, what was that? Was that 28 mil? I mean, I have to take another peek here. Let's see what that actually was. I gotta actually keep my eye on that one because, okay, saw that coming. Stupid, like, that's the whole thing too, is max health seems to have been nerfed, or maybe it's just because I rolled it off of all of my gems. I am so squishy in U9, dude. Okay, let's try that one more time. One more time, here we go. That looks like 2 mil to me. Yeah, that's only 2 mil, so that's not really, like, I guess it is technically extra damage for you getting attacked, but at the same time, it's like, the only time when you would end up getting attacked for the most part, like, I'm not fighting back, is the whole thing, because otherwise, for the most part, even in Shadow Towers, that wouldn't be particularly useful, honestly speaking. Like, that's just, why would I take that over a damage augment is the whole thing about it, right? And the fact that it doesn't do crits. And crits are the lifeblood of Trove. That's how you end up doing damage. So the Pirate Captain, on the other hand, this one can crit. So it's got the passive of 50 magic find, but then also damaging an enemy, I like the description, I'm much better on this one, has a chance to call a cannonball from the sky. So this essentially is going to just do extra damage to whatever enemy you're fighting. And let's see if we can actually get it to trigger here. There it was, right there. It ended up, I mean, he was already dead, so we didn't get to actually see that. So let's try it out. The other thing, too, I want to try before we end up moving on to the next ability is see whether or not it's actually going to do AoE damage and attack more than one enemy. So we might have to go into a dungeon and see whether or not it's actually going to do anything. Come on. Can you trigger for me, dude? Where are you? There we go. So that was 48 mil right there, and I'm doing 21 mil per my basic attack, and you saw that it crit. So that's actually a pretty powerful ability just because that's more damage, right? Like, that's just straight up a passive. But let's, oh, excuse me, water went down the wrong tube. Let's experiment here and see whether or not it actually ends up, you know, can it hit more than one enemy? Yep, it actually hit both of them. So that's an AoE attack that's going to do maybe about double your damage. The fact of the matter is, too, that we could be doing a lot more damage just because I don't have the strongest power rank on my Pirate Captain right now, right? But otherwise, that's very interesting. That's a very, very useful ability for sure. I think lots of people are going to use this one. If not everybody using it for farming, just because of the extra 50 magic find already as a passive is just really good. So the Fake Trickster, now this one is very interesting as well because apparently if you end up having your Fake Trickster at level 30, I think you end up actually getting 110 movement speed while you're flying. So this is just flying speed in general, meaning that right now we're actually flying with 105 movement speed instead of the usual 90 movement speed that we had from wings. Or is it 90 movement speed or 100 movement speed? I don't know, but in any case, you're going to end up being able to fly faster than the air primordial dragon if you end up actually having your Fae be strong, right? And then on top of that, critical hits to enemies can spawn a shiny bomb that deals damage. The damage is useless, but it stuns enemies. This one's actually pretty good for Shadow Towers, especially with the Shadowhunter, just because it procs a lot and just triggers like constantly. But let's see if we can get, I want to try and show you a nice little example. That was the bomb right there. So it actually operates the same as the Shadowhunter's snare ability, where you throw down a snare with its number 1. It's going to operate very similar to that, where it's AoE. It's going to be able to affect the whole area of enemies around and stun lock all of them. But the fact is that as far as adventuring is concerned, I want to show you that, the ability is absolutely useless if you're actually like kiting around an enemy. You're gonna have to try and lure them right back into the stun because the bomb itself, I personally feel, doesn't go off as quick as it should, and because of it, half of the time it just misses. In Shadow Towers, it should be okay because, you know, you're gonna have all the enemies all bunched up together and it's just going to be extra stun lock, right? So I guess you could kind of have somebody using that ability while maybe the Shadowhunter is also throwing down his number 1 over and over, and potentially you could just stun lock the whole group. It's a pretty good ability, honestly speaking. I would actually recommend using this one on Shadowhunter, because then you don't even have to use your number 1, and you can just not only constantly just do damage with the Shadowhunter, but it's going to have that much more chance for it to actually activate, right? So then we've also got the Candy Barb here. Now this one's a little bit interesting because first of all, it gives stability. If you're wondering what stability is, because I know that the game doesn't do a good job explaining it, it's pretty much a useless stat. It prevents you from being knocked back by enemies. Most of all, this is residue of back in the day. There was actually a stat where players could have more knockback to their abilities, and it was useless because it would knock enemies out of dungeons and stuff, similar to how the Boomerang Er's ultimate and stuff still does, right? So damaging an enemy has a chance to drop candy that increases attack and movement speed or heals. Now, this could potentially make this very, very good for gunslingers, because the one thing that I find really interesting about it is it says that it's a chance, but it actually seems to be guaranteed. It seems like it's just on a cooldown. So let me see if I can end up getting to some more. There's an enemy right over here. But you saw 2 seconds ago, we ended up attacking that enemy and triggering it and having the candy drop for us. As we attack this guy, we get some more candy. So that's going to be the candy that ends up healing us out, while the other one ends up doing the increased like movement speed and damage or attack speed, right? So that's the whole thing, is it seems like it's just on a cooldown. I'm not exactly sure what the internal cooldown is, but there you saw right there, we finally ended up triggering it again. Again, this could end up being a pretty useful skill for like the Gunslinger, not like pretty much useless for the Shadowhunter, just because you don't really need the attack speed. The movement speed is okay, but it's not really that much of an increase. Let's see if we can actually get, I think that's actually, yeah, that's just the healing candy. So let's see if we can end up getting the one that gives us the movement speed. What's our movement speed off of the mount? 40 movement speed. So if we can trigger the other candy here, come on, you. There we go. Okay, so we triggered it. We are now we're still at 40 movement speed. Why? Why did it do that? Maybe the red one is the one that actually gives the movement speed, but that's kind of strange. Okay, let me double check here. Let's try this out, because today is all about experimentation, right? And that's gonna be where it's at. So our movement speed jumped up to 60. Ooh. So is that 15 more movement speed? That's actually not too bad, because that means that that could actually be pretty good for the Shadowhunter, only because it would give you the extra movement speed for farming and stuff like that, so you could keep up with some of the other classes, especially the Neon Ninja Rage speed build. I could see this being very, very useful for farming, because that's even more movement speed. Like, that's 15 more movement speed on top of if you have a pyro disc, and then just the build itself. So that's really, really interesting. I wonder whether or not that stat value, like the amount that you're healed, the amount of movement speed and attack speed, is going to increase with your power rank the same as all the others, because potentially we could end up seeing some really, really fast moving characters. And in a lot of ways, not only would this throw the Neon Ninja way over the top as far as the fastest farmer, but it means that you wouldn't be limited to the Neon Ninja for fast farming, because suddenly you could use this ability with a lot of the other side characters and stuff, right? So the next class ability we've got is the Tomb Raiser. This one's interesting, but so far it seems to be pretty useless outside of being for tanks. So what it's going to do is crit hit is going to go up a little bit. Honestly, crit hit has become one of the most useless stats that you can actually get on your gems. You might even be able to swap it off of all of your gear, and every character could end up going for movement speed because of the fact that your gems are going to have that much more crit hit. But we'll talk about all that in a separate video. So the Tomb Raiser ability is going to be fallen minions have a chance to spawn a random minion. You can only have one active at a time. And it's interesting because while my power rank on my Tomb Raiser is Uggles, we're going to end up spawning just his normal little skeleton baby. But there was somebody else, Kian, who ended up helping us out because he's actually got a pretty powerful Tomb Raiser here on the test server. And he was actually spawning stronger minions. So right there, we actually spawned a stronger minion than I thought we would. would. That is not the skeletal baby. That's actually a different type of character. While the health is not going to end up decreasing passively, it is still timed. So this minion is going to end up despawning. But I want to see, is this ranged? Is it actually going to be a ranged character, or... I mean, ultimately, they're really, really stupid is the biggest problem, and if not absolutely useless. Look, it just got destroyed in 2 seconds and it didn't even aggro the enemy. There is our little baby skeleton. So maybe they only trigger and start attacking when we attack an enemy. Their aggro might actually be tied to something like that. So let's, there you go. Go get him, little guy. Really? Useless. Absolutely useless on a damage build character. However, I'm assuming that they are going to end up scaling on your max health, because that's how the minions end up working in Trove. So that's where something like this, soaking up the extra damage, could potentially be okay. You know, ultimately, it's like you could see this being useful for the Tomb Raiser if he could actually take his own passive, but that's just not going to end up happening, right? So then we've also got the Boomerang Er, which is one of the most useless skills in the entire game, unfortunately. Not only just because of the fact that we've already got Death Defying and just flasks in general, but also because of right now, like my character right now is built as damage. I have no health. So while this, the way that this ability works is a Fey Companion will be floating around you that will provide healing when you are low on life. I'm not sure what the percentage of low on life means. I would like to see these have a little bit more of a description to them, or maybe hover over them and it tells you. But that little fairy right there, that's the extra ally, not the gross pinata one. That's just a disgusting, beautiful thing from Shadow Towers. However, you'll see right here that I've got 106,000 health, which is not much at all, because suddenly I'm going to start dying. Like every single time this guy hits me, he's just draining one of my Death Defying vials. So we're not even going to get to see the healing effect, because we don't even have enough health to get low enough for the stupid thing to trigger. Like, I would like to see if it was just constantly doing healing, maybe just timed, like it was on a cooldown or something like that. But again, it's just absolutely useless when thrown, like it's just thrown under the bus for flasks and stuff like that. It's really disappointing. Now, again, if you had higher power rank, maybe it would end up healing you more, but that doesn't matter when you're not going to be able to get it to trigger, because even though it seems like with this update, they're trying to kind of force players into getting more max health on their gems, and we're going to be able to, because crit hit is going to get thrown to the wayside just because you're getting so much of it. But we all are still going to want to avoid max health anyways, just because of some other values that are going to be taken in place. Now, again, I'll talk about that in a gem video very, very soon. So the Gunslinger one gives you more jump passively, which is pretty good for starting players, I think, but also damage dealt to enemies while airborne is increased. So let's try and get a nice little example right here, just so I can show you this. So we're doing 21 mil damage right here, and then when we jump in the air, okay, so we didn't even go up by a mil. So we're doing 21.6. We jump in the air. We're doing 21.8. So it does end up triggering a crit, but you know, the fact of the matter is that that's only like, what, 6, 7, 8, 200,000 difference in damage. You know, maybe with the Shadowhunter, this could slowly end up adding up over time. But again, I would rather just take something like the Pirate Captain's passive, because of the fact that it just seems to scale that much higher, and we were doing double damage. So I would rather be doing double damage than something like this, where we're consistently doing damage. It's not a chance of doing more damage for sure, but does that really add up? 200k damage? Maybe for the Shadowhunter, like I said, it would end up being something a little bit more useful, just because you're doing the constant damage. Now, the Ice Sage's passive is actually not anything like its description. First of all, you're going to get 500 more magic damage. I mean, that magic damage is going to increase based on the level. So I think it can go up to 750. And then the passive is going to be damaging enemies will activate an absorb shield. The shield can absorb 5% of your maximum health. Scratch this bottom part off the list, because it is the exact same shield that the Ice Sage ends up using. So no matter what, it's going to negate one hit. If you end up getting hit by enemies, it's just going to take it away, like, right away. Now, again, maybe it will end up scaling if you have a lot more max health. Could end up being very, very useful for tank builds. again, but for damage builds and people that are actually out farming, because tank builds are only really useful for shadow towers and maybe for lower end portals when you're hanging out in U9 with some of your friends and you just got to U9. Maybe then you want to carry a tank around. But for the most part, you're going to end up getting super duper powerful very fast with the new gem system. Oh, I didn't even activate the other ability. Oh, man. Why didn't I activate it? Now I feel like a fool. Well, you got that on camera. Okay, there it is. Jeez Louise, so never mind everything I was just saying. But you'll see right here, as soon as he ends up attacking, the shield goes away. And it's going to have an internal cooldown as well. I'm not exactly sure what the numbers are on it. But you can see we're not really getting it anymore. Not really getting it anymore. And then, are we still going to not get it? It seems like the internal cooldown on it is maybe around like 15 seconds or something ridiculous. So there we go. We got it again. And similar to the Ice Sage's passive, well, not his passive, but his number 1 ability, this shield is never going to go away. So it's always going to be around you, and it's just going to end up negating damage for 1 attack. And again, that could end up scaling with a tank character, but I'm sorry, I don't really have a tank character on the test server, so I can't really try it out for myself. If there is somebody who does have a big tanky character on the PTS and you've tested this out, maybe the shield actually will absorb like a couple different attacks from enemies, but honestly speaking, I'm not seeing it because the fact that it only does 5% of your maximum health, even if you're a character like my Tomb Raider on the live server has about like 6 mil HP, 5% of that, any enemy in U9 or Shadow Towers is going to just hit that in 1 hit, so the shield is going to get taken away. I don't think that there's any way you could get strong enough outside of maybe with the new gem system and being able to augment your gems and make your health go to new levels of destruction. You'd be able to maybe survive a little bit more. I don't know. Now, the Lunar Lancer one. Ooh. This might actually be one of the most useful ones. So far, it's actually kind of a tie between the Pirates, the Lunar Lancer, and the Neon Ninja. And the Neon Ninja one is only really useful in Shadow Towers anyways, but we'll get into that in a bit. So the Lunar Lancer is just going to be raw physical, so you're going to be able to get up to 750 extra physical damage, but then also has a chance during combat to transform and receive some of the power of the Lunar Lancer. So even though it says that, don't be misled. It's not necessarily taking stats from your Lunar Lancer or anything. All of the abilities, again, are going to end up technically taking stats from your other characters just because the ability itself is going to end up scaling based on your power rank. What this description means, even though it kind of feels a little bit misleading, I'm pretty confident that what they actually mean by this is that you're going to just you're borrowing power from the Lunar Lancer in roleplay because you're going to actually get lunacy mode. So this is really cool ability here, folks. Very powerful because it actually throws your damage through the roof, and also is hilarious. It makes you like, it's so stupid because there we go, lunacy mode, baby. I'm a giant baby. Oh man, that is so beautiful. Look how gigantic you end up getting. If you could end up having that and then using the duplication vial, like, man alive. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm doing the triple shot, that's because a long time ago on the test server, they actually had the triple shot for the Dino Tamer in the original game code for the class gem ability. I ended up grabbing that, telling them about it, and then they said, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be getting that class gem ability, and then they ended up swapping it to the normal one, but I was able to keep this one. So we all kind of have the assumption that this is going to end up being the second Dino Tamer's class gem ability if they ever end up putting out the secondary class gems, which makes this, would make this character go through the roof because you're essentially doing triple damage, right? So let's try and test our damage here. We were doing 21, so now we were doing 22 while we were triggered in lunacy mode. So in that regard, we're doing an extra 1 mil. And again, that's going to scale very well off of the power rank that you have for your Lunar Lancer, because that's the thing, is this is one of the abilities that scales very highly. Like, some of them just don't. Like some of them just aren't going to end up getting that much of a difference. It doesn't matter how much power rank you have. But then there's ones like this where we're getting 1 mil extra damage just for every single one of our attacks, right? So that definitely is going to add up. Whoopsie daisy, I didn't even notice my pots. I never do. Well, you know what? That dungeon sucked anyways. Okay, let's go on to the next ability. So next we've got The Revenant, unfortunately, we're going to have to skip right over this one because I don't have anybody else to test this with, but you're going to have incoming damage is going to be, you know, kind of brought down a little bit there, so it's kind of a little bit of a defensive passive, but your basic attacks have a chance to trigger a taunt, which causes enemies to come and attack you. Now, I do want to confirm and say that I did end up testing this out. We're not going to show it off in the video, but it's pretty useless. Outside of maybe Shadow Towers, again, it could be okay, just because if you have like a tank character that's actually trying to pull all the enemies, and maybe you don't want to have a Revenant doing that for you. Maybe you want to use the candy Barb or something like that, right? But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't really work very well because of the same reasons that I speculated in my last video where we were kind of looking at the screenshots from the Chinese server, and I was talking about how Trove doesn't have very good AI. And because of it, the taunts don't work particularly well. And they don't work particularly well, even with that passive ability, because I was testing it out with my good friend Crichton. And straight up, I would lure the enemy, and he would kill the enemy without it even aggroing him. And that's, you know, that's like 5 or 6 hits without it actually triggering. It would trigger every now and then, but ultimately, it never really happened that much. So this is going to be a little trickier for us to actually pull off. The Neon Ninja is going to give you extra jump, but it's also going to deal bonus damage to enemies, or have a chance to deal bonus damage to enemies that have less than 20% health. This is where this becomes extremely powerful for Shadow Towers, just because of the fact that Shadow Titans are going to be at 20% HP for a little while for the most average of players, right? So let's see if we can end up getting it to trigger on a normal enemy. So nope, that was just our normal 21 mil right there. Let's see if I can hopefully get this guy weak enough. There we go, that was it right there, 75 mil. So we bump up more than double our damage. If not, was that even triple? That might have actually been triple there, because 21 mil times 3, no, that would be 60, that would actually be 63 mil. So that was even more than triple then. That was more than triple our damage, dude. So that's where that one, like, purples are gonna be going crazy, because you use that one with the Gunslinger, for example, and Shadow Towers, the boss is gonna melt. Like, seriously. It also is really, really good with the Shadowhunter. Shadowhunter now can actually kind of step up in Shadow Towers just because of the fact that you're going to be doing so much more extra damage in a constant stream. Now, I haven't tested whether or not this ability has an internal cooldown, but I don't think that it does. I think it's kind of just a random chance, quite similarly to some of the other abilities that we went through, as opposed to, you know, some other ones like the Ice Sage's Shield, where we know that that one's on internal cooldown because it's not, otherwise it would trigger constantly, right? So then we've got the Knight. For the Knight, first of all, you're gonna get 6 flask capacity, which is pretty good, especially if you're rocking Death Defying, or even just farming and grinding and stuff like that in general, and you want to pop more flasks before you have to go for a cornerstone and stuff. That's not too bad, but it increases your movement speed while riding ground-based mounts, meaning that you can't use dragons or anything like that. If you wanted to go for movement speed, honestly speaking, you would end up using the Fey passive, because you're rarely on the ground anyways. Now, that said, the numbers are so ridiculous for this, because let's just try, for example, here. So we're just on our dragon, and our movement speed is still proccing, even though it says that it's supposed to be only ground-based mounts. Okay. Yeah, so you can kind of see, as soon as we get on our mount, we get the normal 90 movement speed, and then it bumps up by 2. That's useless, man. So what I would like to see is maybe if you end up having a really, really powerful Knight, you could end up getting like maybe 20 extra movement speed. Honestly, I'm not sure what would end up happening with that. The other thing too that I wish that I knew, but I'm sorry I can't actually give you the exact numbers on, is whether or not, like, what are the intervals of these abilities scaling? Because it's not a percentage, it's set values, meaning that we're not going to end up getting our power rank on the Knight to 8,000 and then suddenly we're going to end up getting 2 more movement speed. No, I think it's maybe every 5,000 power rank. If I had to guess, maybe every 5,000 power rank, one of these abilities is going to change, just as the same as down here. Maybe it's every 5 to 10 levels is going to end up changing the passive, but Honestly, I don't know. And then last but not least, well, I guess there is still the Dino Tamer ability. I'll have to show you that on a different character, but the Shadowhunter passive is going to give you more magic damage. See how it's 750? That's because my Shadowhunter is actually at level 30. So the level stat kind of goes in a line down to the bottom right, while the power rank goes to the top right. You see? So that's kind of how I just, you know, visually represent it for myself, just so I kind of understand it a little bit better. But magic attacks to enemies can activate Searing Light, a damage over time effect. This is another ability that unfortunately is absolutely useless because of the fact that it's not going to end up critting. So I'll kind of show you what it looks like right there. There it is. It's beautiful because it reminds me of like the Shadowhunter's gem class ability. So it's going to be like a constant stream of damage, very similar to its machine gun with the bow, right? But we were only doing 15,000 damage right there, and we're in U9. We need the crits, and it needs to be scaled to be a lot higher. Let's actually swap over to our Shadowhunter just so that we can use the Dino Tamer passive, which is going to give you attack speed. Useless for our Shadowhunter, but crit hits have a chance to root targets in place for a short duration. Now, the difference between rooting an enemy and stunning an enemy is to root them is the exact same as stun them, but they can still attack. So you don't want to get close to them. So this is going to be an ideal skill for ranged characters and stuff like that, or characters that can end up tagging enemies from far away. So let me see if I can get to proc right here. Is that it? Nope. There we go. So it quite literally is the Dino Tamer's net. So it's going to end up triggering, and it's over in like 2 seconds, dude. Like, it's not particularly good. Most of all, even with Shadow Towers, it's not going to be very good because it's not crowd control. It does not give you the area of effect ability that the Fey Bomb ends up actually doing, right? So you can only end up getting it to trigger on one enemy, which I would say, you know, I would love to say on one hand could end up being very good for the Neon Ninja, but the fact of the matter is that the Neon Ninja Shuriken already stuns and snares enemies and, well, already roots them, right? So it's not really a useful ability. Now, as far as class combinations, you know, let's talk about the main ones. So for Shadowhunter, you know, again, it would kind of be the same as the Dino Tamer, same as the Gunslinger, honestly. I would just say the Trinity 3 is the Pirate Captain, because that's just extra damage. Maybe you want to use the Fey Trickster if you're in Shadow Towers and you're trying to stun more enemies. Candy Barb could potentially be useful for Gunslinger just because of that extra attack speed, but for the most part, I think everyone in Shadow Towers is going to be sticking to the Neon Ninja ability just because of that extra damage proc, right? However, the Lunar Lancer is a really good one because that's just kind of passive stream of extra damage whenever you end up transforming. And then the Gunslinger passive, I could see being useful, you know, maybe if they ended up upping the numbers on it. Again, I don't really have a very powerful Gunslinger, so it could be that it scales very, very well. And maybe if you end up having a Gunslinger at like 20,000 PR, maybe then this ability would end up becoming that much more useful. Now, I love this system, and I think that it's great that it's actually scaled off of the characters because it means that there's not really going to be one definitive build that's going to end up working for the average player, because it means that you're going to have to kind of take the knowledge that we've shared today and kind of just experiment with it and discover your own class combination that ends up working, because maybe the only character that you have that's strong is the Draco, and then you're starting on another character, and thus you would be stuck with this ability, right? As opposed to some of the others that definitely seem to scale a lot better. Like we've actually got, for example, you know, the Chloro one right here, it reflected like trash damage, absolute garbage damage compared to my Pirate Captain, which is only a little bit more powerful in PR from my Chloromancer, and that scaled much more dangerously for the enemy. You know, it was actually doing a lot more extra damage. And then the Fey Bomb, not really useful for out farming in the world and stuff. Maybe if you're fighting like a 3-star boss or something like that and you're kind of having a little bit of trouble actually surviving. But again, you know, that's where if you're having trouble just out and out surviving and you don't really have to worry about damage, then you could potentially end up going with the Knight just for the fact that you're gaining that extra flash capacity. Because that would be, you know, really good for the Neon Ninja, because then you get to trigger your trailblazing more often for farming faster. And in the long run, would that end up being more worthwhile than actually triggering the Candy Bar proc, right? Of the extra movement speed. How often is this movement speed going to end up happening? Because as you saw when we were kind of messing around right there, it seemed like for the most part, we were getting the healing to trigger more than the other ones. So I don't know, kind of pick your poison, take your pick. But the thing that I love about this system is the fact that it gives us options. And that's something that's been missing from Trove since I've started playing this game up until now. Because even with the gem system, you don't have any options. You just kind of have random chance. With something like this, it's set values and it's all determined. So you can kind of just pick and choose your own things. There might even be a very unique combination in here that somehow just ends up working very, very well. In fact, I do want to say as well to you Fae Trickster mains out there that not only when this update ends up hitting are you going to have your new class gem ability, but also the Neon Ninja's ability is very, very good with the Fae Trickster, because with your ultimate, where you get all of the 3 stabs or staves, however you want to pronounce it, each of those is going to end up triggering this effect. So you're essentially quadrupling your damage whenever you end up using your ult and an enemy is at 20% health. So it's stuff like that where we just randomly discovered that while we were fighting the Dreadnought, and it was just so cool to see, like, whoa, what's going on here, you know? Because we don't really have that good characters on the test server, and I think it would be really interesting when we end up actually getting this on the live server. Now, we'll see what happens as far as the release date is concerned. There are people that are speculating this might even be as early as late July. But if we press F1, my speculation is at the latest, this is going to end up hitting in August. Just because we've got this right here, coming soon. Log in every day in September for rewards. Meaning that whatever, you know, whenever they decide to end up putting the Shadow Tower update out, it means that guaranteed it's going to be before September. And honestly speaking, it seems like it's pretty ironed out. Outside of the Shadow Towers being a little bit broken, the subclass abilities are absolutely awesome. Not really what we expected them to be, though, huh? They're actually very, very different. But anyways, I don't want to take up any more time than I have to, so maybe I'll kind of have like separate videos that'll talk about each of the individual class abilities, just so that I can have like a more focused video that talks about the advantages and disadvantages of each of them. And then for the most of you, you know, there's going to be this longer tutorial that talks about every ability, right? So, because I know that lots of people are pressed on time, especially with all the summer and stuff. You want to go outside and do stuff, not watch me on YouTube. Thanks for watching, though, folks. Very much appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content. Sayonara, and stay epic, everybody.